Dancing deities, ontological oscillations between immanence and transcendence, solemnity and humor. From 2016 to 2017, the Hindu goddess Nani Devi traveled through the Pindar Valley in Uttarakhand, India, for 6 months. She did so in the shape of a dancing bamboo pole, wearing saris. In my PhD thesis, I tried to get hold of the emotions, effects, and atmospheres involved in her ritual procession, as well as of the feelings which are ascribed to the goddess herself. Her embodiment in a bamboo pole and in other forms enables human people to sensually interact with her. In this sense, she is a member of the village community and part of religious situations. However, there is space for more than one ontology behind, for various interpretations of who or what she is. She is both dancing and danced, in Hindi nachaya. Making her dance means to invite her by means of drumming, singing and mantras into her bamboo body and into possessed human bodies. In mythical stories as well as in rituals, Nani Devi appears as someone with feelings, fears and ambitions, like a person, Vyakti, whereas some think of her as an impersonal force, Shakti. Like human people, the goddess is described as angry. The purpose of this ritual series is to make her happy again, to heal the people in the region from an affliction, a dosh, which results from her anger. When speaking about her behavior during the ritual journey, people describe her as driven by impulses of attraction and longing for them. As little as I know about embodied simulation theory, this model seems fit well to Nani Devi's embodiment as a pole, and to the way local people treat her. They see her moving, they imagine themselves as a pole and as moving like her, and they then bodily resonate with her movement. They are literally moved by her movement. The way they describe the impulsive goddess and her feelings has indeed a lot to do with the appearance and embodiment of the goddess in front of the people. The encounters can be very well explained as an embodied recognition of one's own bodily reaction to strong urges and desires, as a way to feel with her. However, what would I seek to explain by that? Do I seek to explain how the people of Pindar Valley try to get into contact with their goddess, who is a crucial part of the family and village network? Or do I seek to explain why they make her up? Why they use the goddess to project their own desires, fears and group identities onto her? Does it, once more, amount to the belief that animist notions are just wrong explanations? Is the goddess a product of computation, as the title of the article where I took this image from. Has it a computational account of borderline personality disorder? A goddess as a product of computation? Such an explanation would continue to explain the goddess away as a product of computation. To some local Hindu practitioners and believers, that might even be acceptable, as they think about deities in terms of appearance, illusion, and play, Roop, Maya, and Leela. These terms are used to frame agency, personhood, and feelings in general, not only the agency, personhood, and feelings of deities. In that sense, thinking about reality and the feelings of others as not quite real has a long tradition in India. However they got there, in Himalayan villages, these Sanskrit terms are much around still. However, even within such a framework, most people in these villages take the danger posed by the goddess and her anger very serious. I do not want to say that they are right to be afraid of her anger, but I also do not want to say that they are wrong. Searching for an agnostic language, a language to speak about the processes of simulation and imagination at work there, embodied simulation theory might be helpful, as it does not say that the feelings of others, which we simulate and imagine, are wrong. After all, it is mostly applied to how we humans resonate and communicate with other human people, and not only with spirits or goddesses. Most neuroscientists do not claim that these other human people do not really have feelings, only because we imagine them to have feelings. However, I am still reluctant to think about the mind as a computer. Therefore, I stick to Susan Langer, who already used terms such as simulation and imagination, illusion and virtual powers to describe the realities created in dance. With her, I would hold against a computational model that the forces presented in dance are always felt, not computed or inferred. She regards feelings not as irrational, but as a mode of rational thought in what she calls presentational symbols, symbols which are mostly nonverbal, but not all. But that would go too far here. Watching a dance performance, Langer wrote, one is not aware of people running around, but of the dance driving this way, drawn that way, gathering here, spreading there. In the same way that we can say such things, we can also say that the goddess is dancing. Even though the virtual powers emerging in dance, theater, and rituals do not necessarily have an effect in a physical, measurable sense, they are nevertheless there. They are part of an intersubjective world, and they are collectively experienced by people coming together. As old and outdated parts of Langer's theory are, she still provides me with a useful framework for taking into account that the people of Pindar Valley themselves do sometimes treat Nani and other deities as symbols rather than as persons. They even switch between modes of reality. There are solemn and intimate moments of worship and devotion. There are dramatic events of possession by ghosts of the deceased, reminders of family tragedies, and there are funny theater and dance performances in which goddesses and gods themselves often act clumsily and inspire laughter among the audience. In these villages, many mythical narratives about human actors entering the ritual stages are free to be taken literally, metaphorically, or both literally and metaphorically. In any way, they work to enhance the world people live in by aesthetic and imaginative means. People of Pindar Valley use words like Nach and play, like dance and play, for the rituals and the realities created or emerging in these rituals. Both terms can stand for acting as well as for possession, but they do not make a clear distinction between the representation of gods and ghosts and goddesses and divine presence in itself. Theatrical representation and the presence in procession rituals. In these religious performances, dance as the creation of virtual powers has a double meaning. It allows for both the construction and for the playful deconstruction of the worlds human and other people live in. Dance gestures, Susan Langer again says, can be at once self-expressive and logically expressive. On the one hand, symptomatic of spontaneous like laughter or tears, and on the other hand, symbolic of feeling, of virtual, imaginary, illusory, abstracted feelings or powers. This means, like the gods or goddesses or ghosts represented and presented in ritual actions, in dances and in ritual dances as well, human emotions can be expressed both in a direct, spontaneous, symptomatic sense and in a symbolic sense, as what Susan Langer calls an idea of emotion. Illustrating the range of dance gestures from spontaneous expression to conventionalized sign, she tells us about a squirrel which might make expressive gestures but is not dancing, as long as it does only present but not represent the feeling it shows. Building upon Ernst Cassirer's philosophy of symbolic forms, Langer relates these non-verbal ideas of emotion to religious world-building, to the imagination of the world as a realm of individual living forces, each a being with desires and purposes, and to metaphors by which human minds have built up their whole world out of powers which are modeled on subjective feelings of potency. In an earlier draft of her theory of art as virtuality, illusion and simulation, she makes explicit that illusions do not have to be deceptive. And a simulated feeling is not a wrong feeling, but an embodied concept of a feeling. In this way, she thinks of dance as the non-verbal conceptualization and representation of feelings and forces within and around human bodies, through a bodily activity which abstracts the sense of power from the practical experiences in which that sense is usually an obscure factor. The dance creates an image of nameless and even bodiless powers, filling a complete autonomous realm, a world. Such assumptions find a more solid ground in the theory of body-based conceptual metaphors and in recent neurophysiological research on body schemes, body knowledge, joint speech, and bodily synchronization, terms members of the Aesthetics of Religions network have borrowed from cognitive science or neuroscience. Whatever the difference is, I'm not so deep into that field or fields. Why do I stick to Langer's terms and theories, instead of engaging further with the newer theories? For once, I do not see me getting familiar enough with this huge and trending field of research to really know what I would be talking about were I to borrow these terms as well. Furthermore, I'm also a bit suspicious, even if these cognitivist theories of the mind, like embodied simulation and predictive processing, do not claim that simulations and predictions are wrong. Don't they also try to embed and subsume cultural phenomena under the umbrella of neurophysiology and biology in general? That would raise the danger to fall back into the animism theory of Edward Tylor. Animists attributing agency and feelings to entities which are really just plain physical bodies, material things, natural beings, stones, plants, and animals. It would also not be so different from a Freudian theory of projection or from a Durkheimian theory of collective effervescence, even though I'm myself not totally adversary or opposed to using such theories. Durkheim, for instance, has been updated by Sebastian Schlüter, who translated it into the vocabulary and computer metaphors of neurosciences. Feedback loops, online-offline communication, circuits of cognitions, these are the terms he uses. I propose that we should not ontologize the metaphor of the mind as data processor too much. Even though the metaphor of the computer metaphor for the mind seems obvious because computers are, after all, modeled after the mind. Instead, we should treat this metaphor as a metaphor, a virtual approach to reality, as much as people in the Indian Himalaya are able to treat the personhood or power of their goddess as a reality and as a metaphor in the same time. Sometimes the personhood of the goddess is a metaphor for her impersonal power, and sometimes power is also a metaphor for emotions. Not so different from how we ourselves talk about emotions, namely often in terms of physical forces. Just as we should take our own worldview seriously and should not restrain from building theories on the fundament of our core metaphors, we should still be aware that our ontology is based on metaphors. As conceptual metaphor theory has it, there is no way around thinking in metaphors. However, we are not bound to only one metaphor. We can think of our feelings as fluids contained in our bodies or selves, but we can also think of our feelings as an atmosphere surrounding us, experienced by more than one person. We can think of thinking as data processing and of our minds as computers, but we can also think of thinking as hiking through a landscape, as the meandering of rivers, as the growth and spreading of a treetop, and as battles, and so on. Switching metaphors, using incoherent metaphors, might liberate our thinking to some extent.